Sir Luton, and welcome to this episode of the Markov Dossier, a Dystopian Age podcast. My name is Scott, and I'm here with Sam.
Howdy, Pilgrims.
And we are also joined by two other esteemed gentlemen. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Oh, why not? Go on, Matt, you can go first.
So, sure. Hi there, I'm Matt Carter. I'm a game designer for Warcradle Studios, and I specialise in organising playtesting within our department.
Yeah, Matt is our playtest maestro extraordinaire, and I'm James Hewitt. I've been the lead games designer at Warcradle for nearly a year now. It's flown by. And before that, I've worked around the industry in various different things, but mainly now I'm just like, I don't know, Dystopian Wars games man. Dystopian Age. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Dystopian Age. It's been a very long day.
I see. Not even a minute in, and we're already going. Oh,
Look,
I've got it wrong.
First impressions are really important, and no, I'm a fully professional person who's in charge of looking after Warcradle's game design overall direction. So I help run the game dev team, Matt and the rest of them, and we've been working really hard on Armoured Clash recently.
As we've met you quite a few times now because you have been running between you the playtest events in Nottingham, and we've been attending as many of those as we can.
Yes.
How have they been going? Because that's new. Warcradle didn't do that before. We didn't do that with Dystopian Wars, and we didn't do that with Wild West Exodus. And this is new, and it's a genuine privilege to be involved in the process. How is it working out for you as a studio? The feedback you're getting from it?
Yeah, it's been really good. I mean, I'm a big believer in playtesting being a big part of game design just generally. I think you can't design a game effectively without just as much playtesting as you can do, mainly because it really shares the load. And I mean, Matt, you can vouch for this. When we're in the office,
I certainly can.
Yeah, we will. If ever we have like a debate over a rule or something that we're not sure about, the answer is always take it to the table. Let's roll some dice and try it out. And so I mean, how long have we been doing these for now, Matt? The external sessions.
We've been doing them since at least before Union was released. So a good while now, at least since October last year. So it's been a really interesting journey, and we've had some great feedback from all of the playtesters that come each time. Honestly, the feedback we get is always really, really useful, and sometimes it corresponds to something we've seen when we've been playing, and we're like, oh, that's good. It's not just us who are noticing this or are following this. And sometimes something comes out of left field, and we're like, oh, we would have never anticipated that being a thing. And then that creates a whole discussion where we're sitting around and we're like, this has happened. How do we feel about this?
There's that wonderful moment when you're around the table and someone does something, and then like usually it's me and Matt there, but occasionally other people. Me and Matt will just look at each other, lock eyes, and be like, oh no, that's a thing we hadn't considered. But I mean, it's never really an oh no, because the whole point is you're testing to find those things, and it's much better to find it, in a closed room in a secret pub in Nottingham than when the game hits the player base.
Absolutely.
So those times, those things have been, that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really has. It really, really has. There's been some genuinely excellent moments when we've been watching the tables, and some genuinely golden moments where somebody's made an impossible roll and it just brings the house down, because it's just one of those great moments in wargaming where, I think there was one time where somebody charged a load of Blackwatch Dragoons into a tiny little Union fire team, and the fire team still managed to bat them off because the Dragoons rolled terribly, and the fire team was able to get heroic strikes followed by more heroic strikes, and I was actually able to beat the Dragoons off the objective, which was just one of those great little wargaming moments that
I think
it's
one of those things in wargaming, like you can theorize all you like. You can run the numbers, you can do the maths, but really it's a very visceral, emotional experience a lot of the time. You get to the table and there's nothing quite like those weird little surprising moments that jump out and catch you. And obviously when you're testing, you kind of don't want too many of those to happen because you want the more normalized experience. But it just brings that sense of fun, because at the end of the day, we are playing games. Even though we're testing, we are still playing. And one thing I'm really proud of, and I think, Matt, you do a great job when you run these sessions, is there is always a sense of fun in the room. It's a really good atmosphere. Everyone's just having a nice time. It's a really lovely little community we've got there.
honestly, it's a testament to the community itself. They always come with a wonderful attitude, and they're always very willing to listen and sort of gather round when I'm like, okay, this is the brief, this is what we're going to do today, these are the sort of questions we're looking to answer. And everybody's always really interested to see how far they can push something, or if they can do something interesting with something. And we always test as much as we possibly can with the timeframes we've got and the resources we've got. But obviously, one of the concerns about that is that, you know, we're a group, we play, we might develop our own little metas without realizing it. And sometimes it's just nice to get a fresh set of eyes on something to see just what they're going to do with some tools and some toys that you've put together. That's always really, really useful. It's one of the most useful things to come out of those testing sort of sessions.
Absolutely. So I'm really curious, like, for you two, like, is this the first playtesting you've done, or have you done things before?
I've done a little bit of playtesting before. I did a little bit of playtesting for, I believe it was Dead Zone. I did a little playtesting for.
Oh, right, cool.
Because there was a big meta in our area. We're not far from Nottingham. And one of the guys, he sort of did a little bit of playtesting of rules. So it was not quite the same setting, but it was a similar process of like, this is what I want to see, if it's broken or not. But yeah, attending the sessions has been a lot of fun. And like you say, the community in general that have turned up are always willing to have, you know, honest discussions about this doesn't work, this does, you know, doesn't do what it's supposed to, or if it works, you know, very forthcoming with positive things to say about all the stuff that does work. So yeah, it's been a really, really fun experience, and it's nice to, having been playing war games for a long time, it's nice to be able to have that say of, actually, don't think this works, could it be approached a different way, and someone go, yes, that sounds like a good idea, we'll look at it, rather than just shouting into a void and nothing happens.
Yeah, for me, it's the first time I've done it, and it really is something I'm looking for. When you announce there's another one in, I get really excited that I'm going to be part of this. I've only missed one so far, and I was absolutely gutted when I missed it, because it was when you first tested the planes. I was like, no, I want to see that one. And I couldn't make it because of a family commitment. But yeah, I absolutely adore doing it. It feels, you know, when it makes the title War Host feel something's quite special, I must admit. And if anyone's listening who is in the Midlands area and hasn't done this yet, get in there. Come on, guys. We know there's quite a lot of us in the Midlands, and when they're not all coming, you can have a go. It's brilliant.
And I think we're planning to expand outwards as well and do more of this, because, you know, we've started fairly achievable, fairly small little ad hoc events here and there, but we are planning all sorts of things. We want to do more of these sorts of events, whether it's like an evening or a weekend at some point, maybe. I mean, we've had a lot of enthusiasm. There have been people across the globe wanting to come over to Nottingham to play test, and I get the enthusiasm.
You can do that.
Yeah. When it's like a 3-hour session on a Thursday night, I wouldn't come over from anywhere beyond the Midlands, really. But when it's like, if we did a weekend playtest event, I mean, that's the sort of thing we could do. We could certainly do that in future.
Oh yeah,
we certainly could. Yeah, it would be a great thing to explore.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's been a really nice experience. I mean, also just getting to just meet people who are playing the games, especially you know, as when we were first playtesting, no one had their own armies yet, you know. But now we're starting to see people, you know, coming along, and they're talking about the armies they're building up. And I think we will get to the point where we'll be able to run events where people bring their own armies along, and it'll be a lot less effort on our part, certainly, because, I mean, Matt, you spend a lot of time putting together little army lists and booklets and all sorts of things.
I can be a bit fastidious with it, but it really helps in terms of getting the playing going. But honestly, if we can get to the point where we've got a dedicated core of people who are really enthusiastic and they've got their own armies, and we can be like, this is what we're testing, these are the ideas, bring your forces and let's see how it rock up with your forces and let's see how it all plays out. That would be such a dream to be able to get that system in place. And
absolutely,
every week we are moving closer towards that goal. So I'm very excited about what we'll be able to achieve in the future.
So yeah, absolutely. Also, what's been nice is kind of, you know, seeing the way that the as we've gradually sort of folded in more factions, seeing the shift in the meta, in the way people are playing games. And the moment we first started testing aircraft on the battlefield, there was a real sudden shift in how the game feels, and it's so gratifying from a design perspective to see people other than us playing the games and experiencing those kind of cool little moments that we've either, as Matt said, the ones that we've expected, the ones that have kind of caught us out of nowhere. But as we introduce more complexity into the game, there's more and more little interactions that we don't foresee, and so playtesting is more important than ever, really. So yeah, more of this, I think.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'd agree with that, particularly as once we start getting more aerial units in the game, we'll really get that rock, paper, scissors approach that Armoured Clash was always built on. And until now, it's always been, we've had two parts to that game. We've had maybe scissors and paper, but we've not had the rock.
Yeah.
Or whichever order you want to think of that in. And with the emergence of new aerial units, we're finally going to get those three different elements combining together to create armies. And I think that's going to totally change the way people are playing the game in really interesting ways.
And I think there was a moment in one of the playtest sessions with when we were testing the Enlightened, and the Sickle Cav were first on the table, which of course are an aerial unit rather than a light or heavy. And one of the testers was like, right, what, they light or heavy? No, they're aerial. Yeah, okay, but are they light or heavy? No, they're aerial. I haven't got it. Oh no. And this moment of realization that unit just, there's only so much that you can do against planes.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that we, at the end of the session, you always ask is, how do they feel? You want to see, are we pinning down the design philosophy of them? So, for example, are the Crown shooty bang bang? Are the Union giving us the gun lines and so on? So it's design philosophy. So each faction probably had. I'm guessing you probably have a couple of key. When you're designing your factions, you go, a couple of keywords there. How are we fulfilling that? What was it?
Yeah, we have. There's a very sort of clear idea when we first start doing a faction for Armoured Clash. We will sit down with all the key members of the team. Chris and Stuart will come aboard. We'll have the whole dev team kind of sitting in, and we will talk about, what are the key ideas behind this faction? What sort of themes? What's the narrative? What kind of game mechanics we want them to play with? Because we like the idea of different factions keying into different parts of the game in different ways. Obviously with a lot of crossover, but yeah. And so that's kind of where we always start, and then we check in at various points throughout the process to make sure that they still feel like it. Now, as you've said, in a playtest session, one of the questions we are asking is, does this feel like the Crown, the Empire, the Enlightened, whatever? So yeah, I don't know, Matt, you're a good person for this. What would you say are the key principles for each faction? You've got a great brain for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's go in order of release. So let's start with the Crown, and sometimes you have these interesting shifts in terms of how we end up designing a faction. So like the Crown, for instance, started off as very much like they were very much the default Armoured Clash faction when we first started designing the game, because we needed somebody to be the little guinea pig, and it was the Crown that we started off with, that to basically say, does this game work? And it did. And then as we sort of got more confident with that, we were able to tweak the Crown more and more, so that by the time we got to release, the Crown really started to come across as a faction that specialised in armoured spearheads. And I still think the Crown, that really is the Crown's specialism. Like Galahads and their sister tanks, the Galahad Breachers and the Tristans, all of them are all absolute bricks.
Yeah.
They can take an obscene amount of punishment. And I know there's a lot of discussions about our dear old friends, the Galahads, but I've seen a lot of people talking about having played games as Crown, and one of the things you see coming back time and time again in terms of people's comments are, oh my god, my Galahads were just bricks. They were able to tank pretty much anything that the enemy could throw at them. So I think really, if you're going to distill the Crown to about 3 units that best encapsulates how the Crown play, I think your Galahads, your main Galahad battle tanks, are sort of your bricks that'll pretty much endure anything and throw out a decent amount of anti-heavy attacks as well. Mm-hmm. I think the Mordreds have got to stand up there in that. Still, even now, with multiple factions coming out, I think they're still one of the undisputed kings of artillery in the whole game. I think the moment you as Crown pop your Mordreds on a hill somewhere, the enemy is suddenly not so blasé with where they put their armour, because those units could disappear quite quickly if you roll very well with your Mordreds. And then I think the final unit actually comes down to the Humble Rifle Platoon, which I think the Crown has a lot of elite infantry. And I think the eliteness of their infantry is captured in their rifle platoons, in that compared to the other sort of standard infantry of other factions, they throw out a decent amount of ranged dice. They've got some nifty little tricks like stoic defense. They've got a pretty high discipline value. It means that, they're very good at their job, which is using opportunistic fire to overwhelm the enemy in disciplined, well thought out firefights. I think that's the thing with Crown. I think a lot of people are everybody gets very wrapped up in the huzzah sort of aspect of the Crown, and I think there's definitely a role there. You've got units like the Horse Guards and to some extent even the Blackwatch Assault Dragoons and Royal Engineer Sappers if you get them charging at tanks. It all captures that huzzah aspect.
Yeah.
But I think with Crown, you've got to pick your firefights. Pick your firefights, pick your engagements, and suddenly you'll be overwhelming the enemy pretty quickly. But don't expect to just line your dudes up and expect to get into a slugging match with people. That's not how Crown play. But if you can do some interesting things with Crown, boy, can you knock the enemy for 6, because they are not expecting certain things from you.
There you go. That's 2 or 3 simple principles for the Crown there, right?
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's good. This is the thing. So Matt's actually written a series of blogs that will be going up on the Warcradle site at some point in the near future, which are like tactics breakdowns for each of the factions.
Yeah.
And it's basically, you see where it's coming from. But go for it.
I'd just like to say it's another one of those things where that didn't just come from internal playtesting, that was also the product of external playtesting. And also, if I can give a shout out to everybody who's posted battle reports on YouTube, on Facebook, on Discord, and other platforms as well, if you're doing that, if we can find them and read them, it's a really good way of collectively giving us a good impression of how people are using a faction, what people are enjoying about a faction, and then maybe poking at some of the things that people are struggling with a bit and saying, okay, so what's going on there, and is there anything we need to do about that? So honestly, folks, if you are playing Armoured Clash, put your picks up there, put your reports up there, because it's always very interesting in terms of us gathering together data.
I think we can pretty much guarantee that if you put a battle report on the internet, Matt will watch it. You will ferret it out and you will watch the entire thing. The secret's out. But yeah, so the Crown, as you say there, let's have like a 10-word summary. What's the Union?
Union is overwhelming firepower, pin down the enemy, break them up, wipe them out. That's Union.
That's perfect. The Empire?
Empire, I would say implacable wall, march forwards, use your defensive capabilities as much as you can, and pick close quarters combats that suit your players and use specialized troops to their full advantage.
And then the Enlightened is just blast War of the Worlds at full volume and charge, right?
Pretty much. I would say, though, with your Enlightened, don't be afraid to get your generals up there. Peer review can turn your army from a load of scared menials into a load of psychotic killers. And I think where you choose to put your general basically creates a solid rock that the rest of your army can center around in terms of auras, in terms of all of that sort of stuff. But on the other side, don't be afraid to sacrifice your less expensive, less important troops if it's going to buy you time and objectives and victory points.
Yeah.
Because after all, they're not the ones that are going to bring in the bright future that the Enlightened are hoping to realise.
They knew what they were signing up for, or at least they signed up for it and they should have read the small print.
There was consent-ish.
Yeah.
Always read the terms and conditions.
When in doubt, overcharge.
Yes. As I've said before, I think it's beautiful that there are kind of two very distinct schools of thought when it comes to playing Enlightened and Armoured Clash. There's the always overcharge every time and don't overcharge, that's silly. And I think it's great that those two things exist. And I mean, we were very keen to make sure that any of the wackier rules like that, the things where it was a bit experimental, a little bit random, they're always opt-in. You can play completely fine without using overcharge or locomotive boosters or any of those kind of rules. But if you do, it might be amazing. And I mean, for me, I'll push that dial to 11 and see what happens every
I
time.
would add that I think inside every Enlightened player there is in fact 2 Enlightened generals. One which wants to overcharge all the time, and one that wants to do a nice methodical battle plan. And whichever general they're going to be is always going to be determined at the start of the round by the flip of a coin.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I think so.
It's talking to the DW player that would TED just to see what happened.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens if I TED. I've got no tactical reason to do this. What the hell? Oh, it's vanished.
I think it's probably time for us to segue into the big topic, right?
Yeah. We have a big topic.
Oh, we do, don't we?
We do indeed.
Oh boy.
So, the global update. What is the global update? Let's talk about this. So, when we were first working on Armoured Clash, we always knew that there would come a point, 6 months in or so, where we'd want to kind of give everything a little shuffle, just a little nudge, just to make sure everything is working as it should. Because any tabletop war game that's got this level of complexity with multiple different units and things, you can do as much testing as you like in advance before you release it, but you don't get that real playtest data until the game is out in the field. And which is why I really appreciate the way we do things at Warcradle with the digital Orbats and things. It lets us do things like this. So when we say global update, what this is we've gone through all of all 4 existing Orbats, the Crown, the Empire, the Union, and the Enlightened, and we have made a bunch of changes across the board. There's some stuff that's kind of general, affects everything. Other stuff is specific to each Orbat. We've tweaked a few things up and down. Not much in the way of points changes. We've mainly tried to kind of bring rules in line with points values a little bit. But yeah, lots of stuff. And some of it is quality of life stuff, just to try to make things a little bit easier for people. Some of it is maybe missed opportunities, things we hindsight, where we think, oh, that would have been a great rule. Okay, now's the chance to put that in there. And a couple of things. Matt was already saying about how the Crown, and to a less degree the Empire, because they were developed early on, we played it safe in a lot of ways with them. And since then, we've really got our heads around how Armoured Clash works properly, and so we've taken the chance to go back and make some changes to them. So hopefully by the time this goes live, the global update will be out there. People can go and have a look at the Armoured Clash website and download these things. Every Orbat will have a little section at the back telling you what has changed. And yeah, in preparation for this, we handed over those little what has changed changelog things to Sam and Scott. So I'm really curious, what jumped out at you then? What things did you see in the global update that made you sit up and take notice?
Yeah, so reading through those made me equally sad and happy. In overall, I really it's a small change, but I like the change that Rampage has been renamed to Overrun, just because Rampage gives that sort of idea of absolute berserk, could actually attack my own troops. And I think that was something that was embedded in a lot of people's minds, and that's not the case. So just that little change of a name changes the idea, your perception of what's going on the table. Like you said, when you're playing a game, you want those stories, and sort of if you overrun something, then...
Can I just say I was fully behind the idea of my giant constructs just deciding I'm going to hit you now, and it's one of my own troops. I thought that was hilarious and fully fitting what a construct could do. I'm still arguing that should be. I don't mind nerfing my own troops and having them smack me. I think it's fun.
I think with Overrun specifically, the big thing there was we wanted to be able to apply it to different units. And I mean, as you say, Scott, I mean the name of a rule can really affect how you imagine it playing out. And so, as you mentioned, the Crown, we've now added that to the Horse Guard Cavalry.
Horse Guards, yeah.
So they've got Overrun, which I mean, giving them Rampage would maybe not have felt appropriate, but Overrun, I love it. It's a great rule for them. It makes them extra hitty in combat, and yeah, they deserve it, I think.
I think a lot of Crown players are going to be quite pleased with what we've done with Horse Guards, because not only have we given them Overrun, but we've also given them Iron Resolve, which is a lovely little rule where if you issue a command to a Horse Guard unit and the enemy tries to interfere, your card value is counted as 2 points higher than it actually is.
It represents
very,
their
very
kind
nice.
of extensive training, their noble bearing, all these sorts of things, stoic, stiff upper lippedness. and all of that sort of stuff.
And a little bit of a cavalier attitude as well.
Absolutely. So yeah, so as a Crown player, what else then? We've got the got Overrun. Any other things jumped out at you as fun things?
Obviously, being a Crown player, the indirect changes are very interesting and exciting. I really want to try those out because obviously it's going to have... I think it's going to have a massive impact, but I don't think it's going to be a difficult sort of change of mind. I think it's going to be very easy to sort of just use them once they're out to everybody. I mean, it's not going to be a big change.
The thinking with indirect was that we wanted to kind of collapse down a few of the more complex concepts across the game. And so, for example, we had minimum range as its own quality, and then indirect. Most weapons that were indirect had minimum range, and there were very few other weapons that had it. So we've just kind of collapsed them into one thing. So rather than being a choice to use indirect weapons, you can... You always use them as indirect, but you only get the penalty if you can't confirm visibility on the target. But what plays into that with the Crown specifically is a rule called spotters, which the Royal Engineer Sappers have got, which if they're on lookout, you can spend their on lookout if they can see the target of an indirect shot to make it strengthened rather than weakened. And it's such a fun synergy, and it gives Sappers a real kind of a sort of Swiss Army knife kind of feel. They're a very good utility unit, and it means that, you know, when they're not in a position to do the things that up to now they've always been good at, you know, getting up close and attacking vehicles and things, they have other purposes as well.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the artillery rules and the being out and having Crown being able to the artillery being able to aim and so on, having it much simpler. I really like that because it was a bit overly done, and it makes more artillery more interesting, I think, now, especially having the idea of spotters. Speaking of artillery, what leapt out at me was you've rejigged the reload quality. It's been removed, and you've now... Hang on, if I may read directly from it. The reload weapon quality has been removed as it was causing confusion. Instead, its effects have been rolled into the cumbersome special rule and the slow-to-fire weapon quality. There you go.
Yeah, this was one of those things where... Again, hindsight's a wonderful thing, where we'd gone round the houses repeatedly with how reloading works, and it was probably the number one thing that was coming up as a question from new players was, how does reload work exactly? You know, does it mean that if you shoot, you can't fire again until you've reloaded, whatever else? And what we realised was we can just literally remove the reload quality from weapons and just fold it into the rules for cumbersome and slow to fire, and it's worked really nicely. Also, that has then let us work like a simpler version of all-out attack, which is, that's another one that's been causing some confusion. So yeah, overall, those are both kind of what I'd call quality of life changes, where they just make the game a little bit clearer for new players, which I think is never a bad thing.
Mm-hmm. Another one I noticed is the Vanguard has been tweaked. Originally, Vanguard was just double time right at the start of the game. It's now Vanguard X, so it's a free movement of up to X. And I suspect that's to stop, for example, the bikes suddenly becoming halfway across the board, because a double timer there is about 20 inches.
It's a thing which has a couple of different reasons, actually. Like, one of the things, obviously, is, it means that we can make sure that it doesn't interact with other rules in a weird way. Or, if you've got a unit with really high movement anyway, or a unit that can soar, for example, you're not going to get to, do weird things. But also, let's just do other fun stuff. Like, you can give a unit a really high Vanguard value to represent, like, a ranging forward move, or, anything like that. So there's a lot of fun to be had with that. It just gives us a bit more freedom to tweak things a bit. So Shrouded, for a start, Shrouded's got a really subtle change. What Shrouded does is, rather than saying that the attacks that target the unit gain the concealed bonus, line of sight to the unit always counts as obscured, which generally means they'll then get the concealed bonus, but it can also trigger off other rules as well. But Pioneers, this is a really fun one. If you've got Pioneers, you basically ignore dense terrain within 3 inches of your officer for line of sight. So you can stand on the edge of a wood or a ruin or whatever and see out of it just fine, which is... It's something that had kind of come up in discussion before, and it just gives... it gives those little pioneering units like the sharp rifles and other things like them a characterful little thing they can do that helps them be a little bit more survivable.
Yeah, they can hide. They can actually hide in the woods and shoot out, which previously they couldn't,
Yeah.
because I remember reading that on the Discord, thinking that don't sound right.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, it was one of those changes where we had some sharps on the table and we had them like in the woods shooting out, and it just worked. You know, when you have a unit and suddenly all the things click in place, it's like, yeah, the unit suddenly feels like it really should do.
Yeah.
Like those little niggles now no longer are an issue anymore, and it's just
Yeah.
just nice when you can get a unit just like that.
So I'm curious though, Scott. You said it's a mixture of like happiness and sadness. What things have made you sad as a Crown player?
The thing that made me very sad was the Enlightened getting discipline boosts.
Yes.
Because
I love that. I ain't even had a full game of them yet, but yeah.
So that was actually a thankfully, I mean, the Enlightened Orbit, I believe, is still in launch beta mode on the website, and it's a good thing it is, because due to a little slip up of crossed wires and communication and things, we'd intended to give them a discipline buff before they went out, and then we didn't. And so now we've redressed that. So they've all just had a little bit more. I mean, no one would say they've got good discipline values, but they're not absolutely dire anymore.
No, it's totally understandable. But I just, I was just like, oh no, I was relying on all of his little gribbly things running away, and now they're just gonna
Dance it a bit longer.
get brave.
Well, you have got another one that should make you happy now, because they've took Commander off the Monarch, which means it's now Armour, which means you can now have much easier to have 2 landships on the board at once.
It really
Oh,
is.
yes.
Yeah.
And the
It's
same
great.
with the
Wu-Tai's had
as
the same on it as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious to know what the thinking is. That just literally let's have 2 behemoths on the table, or is there something else behind
It was kind of a narrative-led thing, really, which was, well, it's a number of things. So we were discussing. Oh, see, now I'm entering dangerous waters. Now I'm trying to think which things have been shown off. Okay, so the Imperium cover art has been shown off, right? So we're aware of the I don't know if the names are out there, but there are certainly some large Colossus type units coming out for the Imperium, and it just became clear. The question was raised during the development of those rules: should a behemoth always be a commander? And that just got us thinking. We thought, well, no, probably not actually, because certainly the Monarch. You look at the Sovereign and you think, well, that's clearly a command tank. It's got the massive cathedral dome. It's got the inspiring rule. It feels like a big thing. The Monarch is much more of just a very heavy artillery piece, similarly with the Wu-Tai. And so we thought, well, what happens if you take Commander off them? And the answer is, it still works perfectly. They're an armor unit. You're not going to see them in many games, because the chances of seeing, we don't tend to see many bolstered armor elements in battle groups.
No,
so you'll only
quite
tend to see
rare.
them in cataclysms. But at the same time, they are, they're it like you say, it does mean that potentially it can be easier to get more than one behemoth on the table, and that gives people an interesting choice, because as we all know, infantry and cavalry and things, they're really the units that will win the game for you. But the temptation of having 2 massive tanks on the battlefield, I mean, what you're going to do, basically.
I'm going to put 2 massive tanks on the battlefield. Don't even question this.
Yeah. With the Enlightened, sadly, they've retained Commander on both, because, well, it makes sense for the Surveyor and the Excavator to have, Commander.
That's fine. I'm fully intending to win 2 battle groups. That's no problem.
Exactly.
They'll be on the
Exactly. Yeah. And actually, on that note, one of the things that you will find is we have done some tweaking in the battle groups themselves as well. So we've added a few extra little options to bolster things. We've added a couple of extra unit elements in a couple of places. Matt did some very... In fact, Matt, you can talk about that, because it was really your baby, the battle group revisions.
Yeah. So essentially, some of it was just looking at just giving the battle groups who already had a good old poke, and seeing how they could be improved and how they could give some players some new opportunities in terms of what sort of forces they wanted to field and what sort of units they wanted to contain. So, like, for instance, with the Crown, we've just given a couple of boosts so that the standard Crown battle group can include some more infantry, just so that you can really, really get some more elite infantry into your standard Crown battle group. And then, for instance, also we've made some changes to mainstay units in places. So the line breakers, for instance, Now your rifle platoon isn't a mainstay unit in the line breakers, but Horse Guard cavalry are, because the idea is that the line breaker battle group really represents a sort of a spearhead force as part of your main crown force. So it's not just tanks rumbling along, but it's also your brave horse guards on their robo horses sort of accompanying them to sort of act as your armoured fist to push through the enemy front line. And you'll see sort of various little tweaks and changes like that across the different battle groups in the factions that are already released.
That was one of the examples of a situation where we were quite conservative early on. We, in the early days, we were thinking, okay, well, all of the mainstay units across the faction should be the same across all battle groups. And later on, we realised, no, we don't have to do that. We can mix it up. And so we've just kind of gone back and poked at the Crown and the Empire in that regard. So yeah, most of the changes you'll see are in the Crown and the Empire. Some of it is just like adding little rules. Like the Bulnabang winged infantry in the Empire have got shrouded, which they really should have always had, probably. Green Banner Guard have had quite a big change because
they have.
We did a lot of thinking about their weapons, and I think when we were first designing them, it was, again, this is all such early days. For some reason, we had it in our heads that they were armed with almost like shotguns, like very, very short range things. Whereas actually the miniatures, by the time we got to seeing them, they're more like carbines. And so we've tweaked the stats in line with that. So they've got a little bit more range. They've lost point blank, but hopefully people will be happy, to have that slightly longer range on the guns. And here's the bit that Empire players might be less happy with, but I don't know actually, because I think they've picked up a really fun rule. Matt, do you want to talk about the Pavises?
Yeah, let's talk about Pavises. So, sort of a little bit of behind the curtain as well. In a very, very early version of the rules, Green Banners had a special rule called Pavises, which was then rolled into Resilient Front later down the line as part of a sort of general process of wargaming design where you're looking for similarities in rules to sort of merge them together to sort of ease play and stuff. But we had a look at that in a bit of a poke, and we've come up with this really interesting idea of Pavises as being reintroduced as a special rule. And it's sort of, we've scrapped Resilient Front on the Green Banners, and instead Pavises is a rule where the unit can take cover, and when it takes cover, it always benefits from the effects of taking cover, even if the enemy's line of sight is not obscured, which is a really interesting thing. It's sort of almost, you can almost feel them form a little almost Romanesque testudo as they're sort of plonking all of these Pavises down and forming this lovely sort of defensive barrier. But additionally, with Pavises, when you take cover, you keep taking cover until you move.
Yeah.
Usually when you take cover, you lose taking cover at the start of that unit's next activation, and then you have to spend your attack step taking cover again. But Green Banners do not need to do this. They take cover once, and again, so long as they don't move, they've got that bonus, which means that they can form this lovely little bastion by linking all their shields together, and then they can just pepper you with carbine fire until you decide to try and rush them and push them off the field. It's really nice.
The other thing is, because normally taking cover, you lose taking cover when you go into contact with an enemy. They don't have that, and they gain their defense bonus in close quarters combat as well. So in a way, we've taken away Resilient Front, but they now have a 360 defensive bonus as long as they're taking cover. And it's such a cool little image, right? It's such a really fun, dynamic rule. I love it.
I love that.
It's great. You rush your Green Banners up the field, you get them on an objective, and then you take cover, and then anything that gets too close, you can just use your longer range now to target them and shoot them.
Yeah.
And it's lovely.
I'm very happy.
Good. And then beyond that, I mean, the other change, there's a few little changes here and there. The BR flak launchers and Tanshi artillery chariots in the Empire have gone from a defense 2 damage limit 2 to defense 3 damage limit 1. It makes it feel a little bit, it's still very much a soldier on a motorbike. You can, a lucky shot will take him out, but that increased defense makes them feel like they're a little bit tougher than regular infantry, but they don't feel as tanky as they did, which feels about right. They were a little bit too chunky. But other than that, I mean, we've got a few little changes in the Union and the Enlightened, but a lot of it has just been little things that, I think mainly with the Union, it was things that probably should have been in the first place. So, for example, all of the Lakota stuff now hovers because it hovers. We've put Spacious on the New Haven garrison, which people will no doubt be happy with. There's been a lot of outcry for that. The biggest one, I think, in the Union is the change to fire teams. Matt, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about it. So fire teams, there was an interesting interaction with Union infantry with fire teams trying to get into trucks that players were talking about online. We thought, this is an interesting idea. What can we do about this? So we sort of had a poke and tried a number of different things that we could do. But we've settled on something that I think is a really interesting answer to sort of some of the things that players are talking about. In that now, a fire team that gets into a transport unit, like if their parent unit gets into the transport unit, one fire team effectively can also get into the same transport unit for free, effectively, in terms of capacity. So basically, you can run your fire team and your parent unit up to a transport, and they can both get in. And your fire team effectively counts as having a capacity value of 0, which is really, really interesting. We were talking about it, and we almost like the idea that because you've got the GI bots in the fire teams, that they are just able to be magna clamped to the side of the truck whilst the actual fire team gets in,
or they fold up in some way, or exactly.
Yeah, because they're not so worried about claustrophobia and all that sort of thing.
But it was a nice way of kind of getting around the idea. Like we didn't want to make... People wanted us to make the transport's capacity 4. And we didn't want to do it. We were really against it. So that was a nice way of kind of having our cake and eating it.
Yes,
so there.
And I look forward to some of the tactics that Union players will be able to pull off with that sort of thing now.
Yeah.
I think it'll really lean into sort of what we were always planning for with Union, which is this highly mobile force that can really bring the firepower in a sort of a mid-range firefight.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be really interesting seeing how that changes the way Union players are playing with their forces now.
Absolutely.
It's going to make quite a difference. I know that was again, watching the Discords, people going, I can't get my fire team into a transport, they get left behind, and then that's it for them. So that's definitely a massive boost for it, because it makes sense, obviously.
Yeah. And I suppose the biggest change, I suppose we've buried the lead here, the biggest change, the reason that we were doing this at all is we knew for a fact that the aircraft were coming out. So we knew we'd be cracking open the Orbats and doing change on every one. And the global update seemed like a good thing to do at the same time. So, of course, the big thing is aircraft. Aircraft are now in the game. Every one of the 4 factions has now got its own aircraft unit. We've added them to the faction battle groups, and occasionally, I think everyone but the Enlightened, I think everyone has them in at least one auxiliary battle group, and the Enlightened has it in 2. But the Enlightened can't bolster in the auxiliary battle group. That's the difference.
That's correct.
But yeah, we've got the 4 aircraft, and they add some fun to games. So I believe, Scott, you've played with the aircraft, haven't you? Sam, you have.
Yeah, we both did. Yeah, we got to play it.
Both played,
It didn't last long, but we got to play it. I came across the intercept rule that his plane had, and that was the end of my plane. I was like, oh well.
Oh, yes.
I don't think I can really talk about the aircraft that I tested. So all I will say is 5 stars, no notes, perfect.
Tell you what, you've mentioned intercept, so let's have a sneaky peek. This is something which is not even going to be out in the global update, but the Mesa is the aircraft in the Imperium, and they've got a rule called intercept, which lets you intercept enemy aircraft with your own aircraft, and it's fun. We won't go into great detail, but it's a variant of On Lookout where you can swoop in and take out an enemy aircraft before it does things if you're lucky.
It was the highlight of our game, I believe. Yeah. It was a lot of fun to use. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm diving in with a sigh thinking, this is going to be awesome, because I'm looking at the loadout on the side thinking, I am so looking forward to firing this off. Oh, never mind.
Well,
cheese rule!
The important thing is we prevented you from doing a cool thing, and that's what matters, really. We want to make sure you don't have any fun. That's what we're after, really.
No, it's a great rule. Did you tell me you'd got it and I just went, got the hell, go for it, or did I find out the hard way? I can't remember now.
Yeah, because we won't go into it, but it was a sort of a mutual, let's see what this does sort of thing.
Yeah, and well, that's what it does. Okay, I'm dead.
Well, on that discussion, shall we start by talking about the scythe for the Enlightened?
Go on then, tell us about the scythe.
Yeah.
So the scythe's an interesting one in that any of you who are familiar with the Enlightened will know that the Wells Super Heavy Surveyor has a nifty little attack that's got the coruscating special rule that allows it to fire through multiple units. And we were mad enough to also put it on the Scythe.
It's possibly the most controversial thing we've done, and I love hate it.
It's delightful.
Yeah.
It's delightful, and with the Scythe, they've also got some other nifty little things in that we actually trawled through the Dystopian War stuff for extra inspiration for rules for the aircraft. So the Scythes have got a very high sort of chance to explode horribly when they get shot out the sky because of some of the rules that are in Dystopian Wars, which was a nice little nod to some of the other forms of inspiration that we've been drawing.
To be very clear, they can shoot a lot of stuff, but they are made of dreams and happy thoughts. You look at them funny, they will fall apart. So they're very much, not even a glass cannon. They're a push that dichotomy even further, and that's the Scythe. Yes. But they're very maneuverable, very quick, and in the right position, very deadly. But look out for anti-aircraft fire.
Yes. If you're planning on facing enlightened at any point, I highly recommend making sure you've got some anti-aircraft models built, because you ain't going to want a Scythe coming at you.
No,
absolutely. Scythes. They are like much of the other aircraft units that are going to be coming out with the global update, in that if there's a chance that your enemy will be bringing aircraft, you really shouldn't skimp on your anti-aircraft. You should at least bring one unit, because aircraft, if they're allowed to just be completely unopposed and fly around doing what they want, can be horrific. At the same time, your dedicated anti-air are veritable dragon slayers most of the time. Yeah. So we have this really interesting cat and mouse between two specific types of unit in the game, which I think will create some very interesting interactions as March rolls around.
I think, in general, with design principles generally, I prefer to avoid what I'd refer to as hard counter units, which is a unit that is specifically designed to prevent your opponent doing one thing. But with aircraft, it's very much we lean into that. You need dedicated anti-air units, otherwise your enemy's aircraft will have a field day. And so, of course, when you make your attack runs, really comes down to, do you hold off to give your own units a chance to take out the enemy anti-air, or do you leave it later and risk them getting into a better position to shoot you down? And there's a real fun third dimension to the game, quite literally, when you introduce aircraft. We've talked about the Scythe. Let's roll backwards. So let's talk about the Corsair, which is in the Union orbit.
Yes.
Tell us of the Corsair, Matt.
So the Corsair is it's a really interesting plane in that it's got a couple of really nifty tricks. It's your Union sort of anti-light, anti-aerial specialist, and because it's got the two nice Gatling guns strapped to its wings, both of those attacks have the devastating quality, as is a bit of a theme in the Union orbit. In terms of nice tricks, it's got a little rule called Supercharge, which means that usually when your aircraft comes in, there are two reaction steps, and your opponent has a chance to do Opportunity Fire with both reaction steps, unlike the usual way Opportunity Fire works with other units. But with the Supercharger, because the Corsair is going so quickly, your opponent will only have one opportunity to do Opportunity Fire in their activation, which really makes the Corsair a little bit more survivable compared to if you were able to get two lots of Opportunity Fire off in the same activation.
Yeah.
And additionally, there is nothing in the Give 'em Hell commander bonus that says it can't be issued to a plane, to an aircraft. Sorry, and we've decided to keep that.
So, and to facilitate that, they've got a rule called hot-headed, which means that unlike normal aircraft, they can be suppressed. So, you can give them hell, but it's going to hurt you in the longer run.
Yeah. But we were playing a couple of games where we did give hell in the right moment with the Corsair, and oof, on light targets they are mad.
I love it.
They are mad. You're going to want to be running troops into buildings and things just to try and stave them off if you've not got anti-aircraft out there. Yeah. But they're a really fun unit.
I was going to say that the polar opposite really of the Corsair is the Doksuri, I would say, which is they are much more. They're veteran pilots. They're pretty much tank hunters, aren't they?
They are. They're outside of your sort of really, outside of your Sanli or heavy artillery, they are your tank hunters.
Yeah.
They've got devastating on their anti-heavy attack. They've got a really good anti-heavy attack, and you can use things like flank attack and stuff like that to bring them in from the side, so that if you've got something like Galahads or Rolling Thunders with resilient front, you can bring them round the back or even round the side and hit them at their most vulnerable area. They've also got a nice little skill called Veteran, which means that it's Veteran brackets 1. And essentially, after you've done all your attack rolls, you can automatically convert one of your strikes into a heroic strike, which couples with devastating very, very nicely. It's operating in a completely different set of rules to some of the other aircrafts in terms of its intended role, and it sort of matches up with a lot of the. If you flick through the Armoured Clash rulebook, you'll see lots of images of Duxuri shooting some unfortunate tank to pieces. And I think hopefully the rules really capture some of those evocative pieces that are already familiar to people.
And then finally, the Defiance Fighter Squadron, which is the Crown's mainstay aerial unit at this stage. And I think the Defiance is kind of an all-rounder, but it's got a lovely little rule called Tail Gunner. It's got the gunner at the back, so it gives a... Now, Matt, remind me, I've not played this one for a while. It's if you get targeted...
If you get targeted by an... Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
If you get targeted by an aerial unit to your rear, you essentially get to make a free shooting attack back at them.
Yeah.
It's a little parting gift if somebody's trying to shoot you out the sky in a dogfight or something
Especially
like that.
if, once intercepting units come in, if a Messer tries chasing you down, you can keep it off your tail, which is a very handy rule. And of course, all of the aircraft have got the fiery demise rule, which
it's fiery demise. Yeah.
It'll be familiar to anyone who's played with behemoths and things, like where you've got a spectacular demise. It's basically a cut down version of that. If you kill a plane with opportunity fire as it's on its way into its attack run, you roll a dice, and there's a chance it might just land, sail over the horizon and blow up over a hill somewhere, but it can very possibly land on the thing it was flying towards and blow up, which is, when it happens, it's just a fun little rule, right?
It's great. We had one game where we had an anti-aircraft unit shoot an aircraft out of the sky, and then fiery demise was rolled. It was a really high result, and the plane literally crash landed straight into the unit that had just destroyed it and wiped that out as well. It was a real sort of I'm taking you with me moment,
It's proper cinematic stuff. I love a cinematic rule in a game like this, and I feel like the aircraft are giving us that. So I'm really excited to see what the player base makes of aircraft in their games. It's interesting because when you read the rules in the rulebook, it can feel like they're not on the table much, but they really, really are. Like, placing them at the start of the round is such a statement of intent. You place them on the edge, you pick the direction they're facing, and what I loved was, like, during testing, you'd have people kind of going around the table, like circling the table like a pool player, looking for the best lines of where they want their unit to come in. And then there's this kind of scramble as the enemy interprets that and starts moving anti-aircraft units into place. And then as it zips across, yes, they're gone by the end of their activation, but they are such a presence on the table. And that's why, rules like fiery demise and things which really give them that, they anchor them to the table. I think people are really going to enjoy it. That's aircraft. Any questions, any last thoughts about the global update at all?
How are people going to be able to get hold of this?
Sure.
When is it? It should be out.
Hopefully by the time this is...
The same time as this.
So hopefully you'll be able to go to armouredclash.com and download them. It's just literally download the Orbats. You'll find them. You'll also find a couple of things. So you'll find the designer's commentary has been updated, mainly to remove the page that talks about reload and all-out attack, because we didn't need it anymore. It happened that it was on that same page. You'll find a lovely file called the rules glossary, which
the rules glossary is a lovely thing that's been produced.
So basically, it's a fun little byproduct of our internal processes. We wanted to create a single document where we had all the special rules in one place and weapon traits, and we thought, let's just make it available to everyone. So there's a PDF you can download which has got all of the special rules and weapon qualities from all the Orbats. So it's worth having a copy of that, so that if your opponent's got their Orbat, you can see what all their rules do. So that's a fun thing that'll be up. You will also find a little addition to the errata for the rulebook, because we've added another little rule in. We don't like adding rules through errata. It's not a thing we'd ever like to do on like a regular basis, but there's a thing that was overlooked early in development, and it's been causing a few little issues, which is that there was nothing stopping you really stringing a unit out in close formation, having a very, very wide like unit that was artificially massive. And, for example, abusing flank attack to bring, a unit of steam bikes halfway onto the battlefield without even blinking. So what we have is we've just incorporated the all models must be within 3 inches of the officer, which is already a rule for open formation units. So that is now part of the rules for close formation units as well. And it just means that units have to be kind of a little bit more pulled in. And, it's a nice little thing.
A bit more ranked and columned rather than just...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a lovely compromise as well, though, because the 3-inch rule does mean that you can still get some quite interesting formations happening, even if you're ranking up dudes and stuff.
I think you can still go 9 wide and 5 deep if you've got a particularly big unit. So it's not particularly restrictive. It's just not stopping very, very silly things. Well, it is stopping very silly things.
We were starting to see some daisy chaining in games and conga lines, and be like,
units straddling 2 objectives in a really dodgy way.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So yes, that's that. The global update. And one thing I do want to be really clear of, though, is obviously we've had a few updates of the Orbats and things since release. This is like, we're not planning another global update until probably close to the end of the year, because we would love to get into like a roughly 6 monthly rotation of these. And so what we don't want to do is just keep releasing little changes to the PDF so people don't know what is the most recent thing. We want to make sure that we're only updating the PDFs when one of 3 things happens. First of all, we add a new unit to an Orbat, at which point we will add it to the Orbat and probably not change anything else in it. So if you haven't got that unit, you don't need to download the new one. If there's a global update like this, then probably it's worth updating it. And thirdly, if there's like a little typo or an error or something, we'll make those changes as we find them, but hopefully it won't be anything too egregious. We definitely want to make sure that we're making the game feel as cohesive as possible. So now that we've got this global update out, don't expect any sort of changes for a little while. So we're going to kind of sit back and watch and see how things go, gather our data, and then, obviously we're already making notes for global update 2. So that's the nature of game design. The moment you release one thing, you start planning the next thing. So if you find things in the game that you think, I think that could be better, I think that could, maybe that's not as clear as it could be, give us feedback on Facebook or Discord. We try to read everything that we can, and it all goes in. Hopefully, if you're someone who has been giving feedback or talking about what you think about different units or the game, you'll look at these and you will hopefully see the outcome of those conversations in the global update. So I'm really hoping that players will enjoy reading through these, and it'll really energize people to get their armies on the table and play some more games. Here's hoping.
So owners of laminators, rejoice, we're only doing this once every 6 months.
Exactly yeah, absolutely the case.
We should be getting. I've ordered a Sorry and a Defiance. So once we get hold of those, we will be. You'll either hear me rejoicing or complaining that Doc Sorry's far too powerful.
Perfect. Wouldn't have it any other way.
I should be picking up my scythes at Salute. I should be coming to see you at Salute if you're there, and I should be picking up a scythe and a few other bits and pieces with legs. Building those. Still building the last box at the moment.
Yeah. But that is it. Well, hopefully that's been a nice, enlightening, no pun intended, look at like the global update and what we're doing. I hope people have enjoyed it. If people have got questions, fire them in. We can. I don't know. Maybe we could do a Q&A session at some point in future.
Well, that's a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. We could certainly, if we've not put you off coming back, we would happily welcome you back and we might even try and do a live Q&A, or actually no, maybe not. That might be.
I was going to say we've had a few issues doing live stuff. Never quite works as smoothly as we think it's going to.
Oh, fantastic!
No, and also you can't edit live things very easily, yeah. So. We'll maybe
we'll find some way of doing a Q&A.
It'd be nice to do.
Well, thank you very much for having us. It's been a really fun
It's been
chat.
an absolute pleasure having you guys. Thank you for agreeing to do it.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
We will see you in Nottingham at some point, I think, in the next couple of months.
You will indeed, yeah.
Well, certainly. And keep your eyes peeled, because I'm sure there will be events advertised relatively soonish on the usual channels for more playtesting opportunities.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Thank you very much, guys. It's been a real pleasure. We appreciate you coming on. Cheers.
Honestly, it's been lovely.